She married him with one goal: stay 12 months, divorce him, and walk away a millionaire. But when the year ended, she got nothing, not a penny. This is the story of the gold digger who picked the wrong man, and the secret that destroyed her perfect plan.
Richard Holloway was the kind of man people whispered about in exclusive rooms. Old money, old values, and an old loneliness carved into the lines of his face. At 61, with silver hair brushed back like a fading storm, he carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who'd built an empire and buried a wife. He wasn't looking for love, just the company of a soul who didn't want anything from him. Elena Marsh wanted everything. She walked into the Atlanta Meridian Charity Gala in a borrowed dress that shimmered like she owned the night. She was 28, breathtaking, and desperate, though she wore that desperation like perfume, hidden beneath charm and a smile that could disarm a firing squad. She wasn't evil, just exhausted by a life that had taken more than it ever gave. Her rent was overdue, her car needed repairs, her dreams were dying slow. And then she saw him. Richard stood near the balcony, a glass of bourbon untouched in his hand. His suit was tailored but modest, his posture relaxed, almost humble. He didn't look like the sharks she usually targeted. He looked safe, the kind of safe that comes with generational wealth and a soft heart. Elena approached him with the confidence of a woman who'd already rehearsed the next 12 months of both their lives. "Beautiful night," she said. Richard looked at her the way lonely men look at light, grateful, surprised it still exists. It hasn't been, not until now. He was gentle, thoughtful, and far too trusting. The perfect mark. Within minutes they were laughing as if they'd known each other for years. Within an hour, Richard was offering to drive her home. Within a month, he was taking her to dinners, introducing her to philanthropic circles, sending flowers twice a week. He treated her not like a trophy, but like someone who mattered. And that was her advantage. Elena's friends warned her, "He's old, he's grieving, he's got 2 grown kids, rich kids, who won't let you near that money." But Elena had run the numbers. Richard's real estate portfolio alone was enough to free her forever. She wasn't planning to destroy him, just extract what she needed, clean and quick. A 1-year marriage, a tidy divorce, a comfortable settlement. In Georgia, that wasn't unheard of. Richard didn't see the strategy behind her affection. He saw salvation. 3 months after the gala, he proposed. A simple gesture, private, intimate, no grand spectacle, just the sincerity of a man offering the last pieces of his heart. "Elena," he said, voice low and steady, "I don't want to spend another year alone. Will you marry me?" For a split second, just one, her defenses wavered. He looked so fragile in that moment, so hopeful, a good man with no idea what he was inviting into his life. But survival has a louder voice than conscience. She smiled, kissed him softly, and whispered, "Yes." The wedding was quiet, tasteful, the kind of ceremony tailored more for meaning than show. Richard was radiant, reborn. Elena looked perfect, composed, stunning in lace, and absolutely unbothered by the vows she recited. Her mind wasn't on forever. It was on the calendar, ticking beneath her skin. 1 year, 12 months, 365 days until the exit. She told herself she deserved it. After all, life had never handed her anything without demanding a pound of flesh first. And Richard? He'd live. He had enough of everything. Enough to spare. But as they drove away from the courthouse in a vintage Bentley, Richard's hand wrapped gently over hers, Elena felt a strange chill. Because for the first time, she wondered if she had finally picked a target too complicated. Or a man too protected.
Elena expected her new life to feel like slipping into silk sheets, smooth, indulgent, effortless. Instead, it felt like stepping into a museum where everything was expensive, guarded, and very much not hers. Richard's estate sat behind wrought iron gates in a mile-long driveway, the kind that whispered old wealth with every perfectly trimmed hedge. The house itself was enormous. Marble floors, vaulted ceilings, rooms decorated in soft whites and blues. Beautiful, yes, but also cold, as if the walls remembered someone else. Her name was Margaret, Richard's late wife, the ghost Elena never met but instantly loathed. Portraits of Margaret hung in the hallways, painted in warm tones that made her smile glow like a blessing. Every staff member spoke about her with reverence. Even Richard, when mentioning her, seemed to drift into a softness Elena couldn't compete with. This wasn't just a home, it was a shrine, and Elena knew shrines were hard to steal from. She tried to settle in, but the estate had rules, real rules, not the kind you ignore. Richard lived by routine. Morning walks, weekly board meetings, bi-monthly charity panels. He inspected financial reports personally. He signed everything through trustees. He reviewed budgets twice a month. Elena wasn't marrying a loose wallet. She was marrying a vault. Her irritation grew when she learned she couldn't access his accounts, not even a supplementary card. Every purchase she made had to be logged through his assistant, a stiff woman named Evelyn who looked at Elena as if she were a temporary stain on a priceless rug. Still, Elena played her part. She smiled. She dined with Richard's business partners. She hosted charity brunches with the grace of a queen. She made Richard laugh, made him feel young, made him believe. The one thing she didn't make was progress. Richard's adult children arrived a month into the marriage. Caleb from London and Miranda from New York. They were polite but cold, carved from the same quiet steel as their father, but with none of his softness. Miranda wasted no time. "You seem nice," she said, each word dipped in frost. "I just hope you're here for the right reasons." Caleb followed with a handshake that was more warning than welcome. "If you're planning to build a future here, you should understand our father has advisors who've been with him longer than we've been alive." Elena smiled, pretending their words amused her. Inside, she was calculating. They were protective of their father, of their money, of the memory of their mother. And protective people were obstacles. One night, while Richard slept, Elena wandered through his private office. It was immaculate, every drawer labeled, every file organized. The only thing out of place was a heavy oak door on the far wall, locked, sealed, almost ominous. She tried the handle. It didn't budge. Her heartbeat quickened. A locked room in the office of a man who obsessively safeguarded his finances? That door wasn't hiding sentiment. It was hiding security. She needed what was behind it. The next afternoon, she met privately with a divorce attorney, an appointment she made under the guise of volunteer work at a legal clinic. The attorney looked over a copy of the prenup she had discreetly photographed. The attorney said, "You need to stay married for at least 1 year. Otherwise, you get nothing. No alimony, no property, just what you walked in with." Elena's jaw tightened. 1 year wasn't a problem. She could play devoted wife for 365 days. But the attorney wasn't finished. "Even at the 1-year mark," she added, tapping the prenup, "you only qualify for support if financial assets are directly accessible. If his wealth is locked in trusts or protected structures, your leverage is weak." Elena walked out of the office with the world spinning around her. Weak wasn't an option. She needed to know what was behind that locked door, because whatever it was, it held the difference between walking away wealthy and walking away empty-handed.
Time moved differently inside Richard Holloway's world. Days felt like minutes, weeks like a blink, and suddenly Elena found herself halfway through the year, 6 months closer to freedom, 6 months closer to cashing in. But the closer she got to her goal, the more complicated the game became. Richard had begun to open up in ways she never expected, not with money, never money, but with the kind of naked honesty that comes only from a man who spent too much time alone. Late at night, after the fire died down and the staff had gone home, he would speak to her gently, almost shyly. "I didn't think I'd feel this again," he'd whisper, staring into the flames. "Companionship." The word hit Elena harder than she liked. companionship. Something she had never truly offered, not really. But the way he said it made it feel like she had given him air after years underwater. She buried the guilt deep. Guilt was a luxury. Money was survival. Still, as the months slipped by, she couldn't ignore how Richard changed around her. His shoulders lightened. His laughter came easier. He started leaving his cane at the door when he walked with her, almost as if her presence shaved years off him. It was inconvenient. Her plan required emotional distance, and Richard kept shortening the gap. Meanwhile, Caleb and Miranda became ever-present shadows. Miranda monitored Elena with a strategist's eye. Caleb went further, researching her, questioning staff, even quietly checking her background again. One night, he pulled her aside after dinner, his voice low. "My father trusts easily, but I don't. Hurt him, and you'll regret it." She didn't flinch. "I married him because I care about him." Caleb's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We'll see." Elena returned to their bedroom furious. Suspicion was tightening around her like a noose. She needed leverage. She needed a crack in Richard's financial armor. And she needed that locked door open. But Richard's office was a fortress. He kept the key on him at all times, and his staff, long loyal, long devoted, would never betray him for a pretty face and a desperate agenda. So she searched everywhere else. His email? Encrypted. His safe? Biometric only. His business folders? Sanitized. His personal files? Irrelevant. She tried sweet persuasion, casual curiosity, calculated vulnerability, but Richard deflected every financial question with the ease of a man who'd been burned before. "Elena, there are things I protect, not from you, from the world. Some scars don't heal." She wanted to roll her eyes, but his voice made her pause instead. Scarred, that was the word Richard carried like a signature. She saw it when he touched Margaret's old piano, when he glanced at her photos. And sometimes Elena wondered whether she was becoming just another wound waiting to happen. But she shut that thought down quickly. Feelings were traps, and she didn't walk into traps. She built them. By the 11th month, panic began to creep in. All her assumptions had crumbled. Richard didn't flaunt assets. He didn't brag about investments. He wasn't careless with his wealth. He was a fortress disguised as a grandfatherly gentleman. When she brought her concerns to her attorney again, the woman's expression turned serious. "Elena, if your husband's holdings are inside an irrevocable trust created before the marriage, you can't touch them. Marriage length doesn't matter." Elena froze. The air left the room. "What do you mean, can't touch them?" "I mean, there's no marital claim, no financial access, no negotiation leverage." Her pulse hammered violently. No leverage? No claim? Then what was she doing? That night, Elena wandered the halls long after Richard fell asleep. The portraits of Margaret seemed to watch her, judge her, warn her. Finally, she stood in front of that locked office door again. Not just curious now, desperate. She needed answers. And fate handed her one. Richard, exhausted from a long day, had forgotten to lock the small drawer of his desk upstairs. Inside it lay a thin silver key on a black ribbon. The key. Elena's breath caught. She closed her hand around it, feeling its cold weight. Then, with the silence of a thief and the heartbeat of a criminal, she slipped into the office, closed the door behind her, and walked to the lock. It clicked open with a soft metallic sigh. Inside, she found a single heavy folder resting on a steel filing cabinet. A folder labeled Estate Protection, Last Revision. And in that moment, Elena knew. Whatever was inside would change everything. For Richard, for her plan, for her future, and probably for the worse.
The folder felt heavier than paper should, like the weight of consequences wrapped in manila. Elena stood frozen,
the dim desk lamp casting her shadow across Richard's sanctum like a trespasser already caught. But no footsteps came, no voice called her name, only the slow, rhythmic throb of her heartbeat. She opened the folder. The first page was stamped in bold, unforgiving lettering. Irrevocable Trust, Holloway Family Estate. Date established, 6 years prior. Trustees, Caleb Holloway, Miranda Holloway, Barlow and Trent LLP. Elena blinked hard. The words didn't move. They didn't rearrange into something hopeful. They stayed exactly as damning as they appeared. 6 years prior. Before Margaret died. Before Elena ever stepped into Richard's world. Before she had a chance to become part of it financially. She flipped through the documents quickly, fingers trembling. Homes, businesses, investment accounts, art collections, retirement funds, liquid assets, property deeds. Everything with a dollar attached carried the same notation. Transferred to trust, protected from spousal claims. Her breath hitched. This wasn't a prenup. This wasn't legal caution. This was an impenetrable fortress, built long before she even knew Richard existed. A structure designed explicitly to ensure that no one, not a second wife, not opportunistic relatives, not lawsuits, could ever access Richard Holloway's empire. Not while he lived, not when he died. She leaned against the cold steel cabinet, the truth crashing over her. She had planned every step of this marriage around an assumption that Richard's wealth was accessible, pliable, vulnerable to timing. But Richard had carved his finances out of reach years before she arrived. She wasn't married to a window of opportunity. She was married to a man who had locked away every door. Elena squeezed her eyes shut. She felt humiliation burn inside her, hot enough to scorch her chest. She wasn't just failing. She had been playing the wrong game entirely. There was a section in the folder titled Prenuptial Agreement, Enforcement Notes. She scanned it, her mouth growing dry. In the event of dissolution of marriage initiated by spouse within 5 years, no alimony, no property allocation, no spousal support. In the event of dissolution initiated by Mr. Holloway, trustee-approved modest settlement capped at predetermined amount. She gripped the page. He had protected himself not from her, but from the idea of another loss, another betrayal, another person leaving him broken and stripped after Margaret's passing. Richard had lost more than a wife. He had lost control, stability, trust, and he had rebuilt that control in ink and signatures. Suddenly, the late-night talks, the gentle hesitations, the walls around his finances, they all made sense. He wasn't hoarding wealth away from her. He was afraid. And somehow, she felt like an intruder, not just in his office, but in his life. For the first time, a thought pierced her ambition. He didn't deserve this. He didn't deserve to be someone's escape plan. He didn't deserve a year-long lie. But pride is louder than conscience, and desperation is louder than pride. Elena snapped the folder shut. Her hands were shaking, her mind raced. If she left now, she walked away with nothing. If she stayed, there was no guarantee she'd ever see a penny. The trust was ironclad. The prenup was airtight. The clock she had been counting down had been meaningless from the start. The reality hit with brutal force. There was no win condition, no loophole, no golden exit. Still, she told herself she could salvage something. She could negotiate, manipulate, appeal to Richard's heart. There had to be some leverage left. She placed the key back exactly where she found it, closed the office door quietly, and walked out of the room like a ghost fleeing a crime scene. But sleep didn't come, because now she wasn't just trapped in a loveless plan. She was trapped in a marriage she could no longer profit from, with a man she was beginning to care about far more than she ever intended. By the time the 12th month rolled around, the walls of the Holloway estate felt tighter than any prison cell Elena had ever imagined. Every hallway, every marble step, every portrait of Margaret watched her like a jury already convinced of her guilt. She no longer slept well, she no longer ate much, she no longer recognized the woman staring back at her in the mirror. She had a plan, but the plan had died, and she was the only one who didn't want to accept it. Richard, oblivious to the war inside her, had grown more affectionate with the passing months. He reached for her hand in the mornings, kissed her forehead at night, smiled at her with a kind of warmth that should have made her whole. Instead, it made her crumble. Her lawyer delivered the final blow in a quiet conference room with dim lighting, as though the building itself wanted to soften the devastation. "Elena," the attorney said, sliding the folder toward her, "I've reviewed everything again. The prenup, the trust, the estate protections. There is no settlement available to you. Nothing to challenge, nothing to negotiate." Her throat tightened. There has to be something. There isn't. The assets were placed in the irrevocable trust years before you entered the picture. That means they're legally sealed. Even a court can't break into them. Elena stared at the papers, willing them to rearrange into a different fate. "Your husband," he continued gently, "protected everything. If you file for divorce, you walk away with exactly what you brought into this marriage, which was nothing. Less than nothing. Debts. A borrowed dress. Old dreams." "Then what's the point of a prenup?" Elena whispered. "To protect what isn't in the trust," the attorney replied. "But your prenup only gives you a modest settlement if he's the one to file. If you file, you get zero." The room spun. "Are you sure you want to do this?" the attorney asked. "You could stay married. It might benefit you emotionally, even if not financially." Emotionally. If only they knew. Elena left the office in silence, her heels echoing down the hallway like a countdown she no longer controlled. When she reached the car, her hands shook so violently she couldn't fit the key into the ignition. Everything she'd built her plan around, gone. Everything she used Richard for, exposed, and the only person who didn't know her truth was the man she'd lied to for an entire year. That night, she told him. Richard sat in his armchair by the window when she entered. The moonlight framed him in a soft silver glow. He looked peaceful, older than usual, but peaceful. She stood in front of him, the confession burning her throat. "Richard," she said, "I want a divorce." He didn't react, didn't blink, didn't look surprised. Instead, he set his book aside carefully and lifted his eyes to hers, eyes full of hurt, but not anger. "I know," he whispered. The words pierced her. He rose slowly, his movements stiff with age. He approached her, stopped a foot away, and searched her face with a tenderness she didn't deserve. "I felt you slipping away months ago," he said. "I tried to hold on, but I realized I was holding on to someone who was never really here." Her breath hitched. "I won't fight you," he continued softly. "I won't punish you. I won't drag your name through the mud, even if others want to." He meant Caleb and Miranda. Of course he did. "I gave you everything I had left that wasn't money. I just wish it had been enough." Those words shattered her. The divorce was swift, invisible to the public until Caleb leaked a rumor to the media. Headlines painted Elena as a gold digger who tried and failed to secure a payout. Social feeds tore her apart. Neighbors whispered, strangers mocked. Richard never defended her publicly, because defending her would confirm the rumors. But he also never condemned her. He simply let her go. When she left the estate, it was with one suitcase and no future. Caleb and Miranda didn't even look at her. The gates closed behind her with a finality that echoed through her bones. Elena Marsh had spent a year chasing money, and now she walked away with nothing except a guilt she would carry far longer than the marriage itself.
The apartment Elena found was small, sunless, and cheap. The kind of place where footsteps from the floor above never stopped, and the walls absorbed arguments like they were part of the foundation. She sat on the edge of her new bed the first night, a mattress that felt thin as regret, staring at the cardboard boxes she didn't have the strength to unpack. A year ago, she'd walked into Richard Holloway's life wearing a borrowed gown and a plan sharp enough to cut through steel. Now she sat in a dim room with silence louder than any punishment a court could have delivered. No money, no comfort, no future mapped out. Just her own choices staring her down. For weeks, the world didn't let her forget. Blogs replayed the story, talk shows joked about it, social media ripped her apart without mercy. Gold digger fails spectacularly. Young wife learns the hard way. The Holloway Trust stands undefeated. She stopped checking her phone, stopped going outside unless necessary, stopped believing she could ever escape the version of herself the world now recognized. But the part that haunted her most wasn't the headlines. It was the quiet, the sudden absence of Richard's soft voice in the morning, the missing warmth of someone who asked how her day was, the empty space where companionship, a real one, not the act she performed, had accidentally sprouted. She missed him. Not the house, not the life. Him. The realization stung worse than losing the money she never got to touch. Meanwhile, the Holloway family moved on with machine-like efficiency. Miranda returned to New York to manage the philanthropic wing of the trust. Caleb flew back to London, no doubt satisfied the threat was removed. And Richard? Richard did what he'd always done. He carried on quietly, gracefully, with more dignity than she deserved. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, Elena received a handwritten letter postmarked from the Holloway estate. She recognized Richard's handwriting instantly, steady, elegant, aging. She opened it with trembling hands. Elena, I hope you find the peace you were searching for. I hope you learn to build something of your own, something no one can take from you. I don't hold anger, just sadness that we never met in a different way, at a different time, as different people. Be well. Richard. There was no bitterness, no accusation, no final strike. Just grace. More grace than she had ever given him. She pressed the letter to her chest and cried for the first time in years, not because she lost the money, but because she finally understood the value of something she had thrown away before it had a chance to grow. Weeks passed. She took a job. Nothing glamorous, just a receptionist role at a local dental office. It wasn't her dream, but it was honest. And for the first time in a long while, honesty felt peaceful. She started talking to her mother again. Started reading books instead of online drama. Started learning who she was without desperation poisoning her decisions. Healing didn't come fast, but it came. One crisp morning, Lena found herself walking past the county courthouse on her way to get coffee. She paused at the steps as a newlywed couple walked out, hands intertwined, faces glowing with a joy that made the air around them seem lighter. They looked at each other like forever wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And something inside her broke quietly, beautifully. She whispered, barely audible, I hope they don't waste it like I did. The couple passed by without noticing her, and that was okay, because this wasn't their story. It was hers. Messy, painful, unfinished.
but finally, honest. Alina Marsh walked away from her year-long scheme with no money, no mansion, and no security. But for the first time, she walked away with clarity. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth more than the fortune she never got to touch.